Not one, not two, not three, but four West Coast editions from the Pac-12 are coming into the Big Ten in 2024. There are two that stand out as the two teams that can achieve the long-term success needed to compete towards the top of the Big Ten Conference. The Oregon Ducks and the USC Trojans. But which of those two is going to achieve the most Big Ten success out of the West Coast newcomers?
From LA to Piscataway, all Big Ten all year long. This is Big Ten 10.
Achieving high-end Big Ten Conference success is now going to be more difficult than it ever has before when you bring in four West Coast programs that are good to really good to great football programs. Now, I got to Oregon and I got to USC because you also have to take a look at Washington and UCLA where they're at. UCLA was able to win 8 games, 9 games, that kind of thing under Chip Kelly, but now being able to do that in a new Big Ten Conference is going to be increasingly difficult. I really like what Deshaun Foster is doing right now. What he has been able to do, hit the ground running on the recruiting trail. I actually think they have a pretty decent team for 2024, but it might take him a little bit to maybe get to that high-end level for some of these recruits in the 24 class, the 25 class, things like that, to be able to develop into good football players between the lines on Saturdays. The Washington Huskies, okay? I'm going on a camping and hiking trip out to Washington this summer. And I'm going out there because they got a lot of mountains and they got a lot of valleys. And it's a lot like Husky football as well. You peak a couple of times, you get to the college football playoff a couple of times, you win double-digit games. You have that. Those are your mountains. Those are your high points. But you also have your valleys. You also have your 0-12s. You also have your Jimmy Lake. So, and I think the same thing could certainly happen under Jed Fish. I really like what Jed has, and I really like what he is as a football coach and a builder of a football program. Having 9 wins and 10 wins, sustained success year after year after year, could be a little bit more difficult in Seattle, Washington. When you look at the USC Trojans and when you look at the Oregon Ducks, those are the teams with backing. Those are the teams with resources. Those are the teams with history. Those are the teams that can recruit, and they've proven it at an elite level in the Pac-12, and you got to think that they're going to be able to continue to do that in the Big Ten Conference as they move over and have an even more bigger revenue jump and more resources to deal with. I believe that there is a formula that Lincoln Riley has installed at USC, and he had the same type of formula at Oklahoma. Let's recruit elite quarterbacks. Let's bring in top-end offensive talent, and let's have a defense that can hold their own, right? You look at what he was able to do at Oklahoma, it really blended in to what he was playing against in the Big 12 Conference, right? Offenses that were wide open, air raid, and that could sling the ball up and down the field and score a lot of points, and there wasn't a lot of defense, really, in that era of the Big 12 Conference at that point. You go over to the Pac-12, once again, a conference full of a lot of explosive offenses, and it really fit into what Lincoln Riley wanted to do. Now, I think he can still work with that mold, because that mold is something that the Big Ten really hasn't seen. Now, there have been great offenses, of course, at Ohio State. You go back to the Penn State offenses with Saquon Barkley, Trace McSorley, and some of those points explosions that they were able to have. But those teams, who were Big Ten champions in their own right, also had really good defenses to pair with them. And that is the big key and the big talking point when you chat about USC's future within the Big Ten Conference. Can they get that defense? Because if this ends up being like these Oklahoma teams that had average to decent defenses and that elite offense, I think you're going to run into a ceiling in the Big Ten. I think you can win 9 games. I think you can win 10 games in the Big Ten with that elite offense and that average defense. But you're still going to end up falling short most of the time, maybe not all of the time, but probably most of the time, to the Ohio States of the world, to the Michigans of the world, to the Penn States of the world, yeah, maybe even the Oregon Ducks of the world you could throw in there as well. We know that you need great line play. You need great play in the trenches, not only to win in the Big Ten Conference, But to win in college football, I think a lot of people focus on the Big Ten as a whole, considering their history as the black and blue run the football, line play, big guys up front type of conference. But you look at what Georgia has become. You look at maybe what some of these higher tier SEC teams have become. They are physical and they are big at the point of attack, and USC needs to be able to do that to be able to get to that next level of college football. What are the heights that USC wants to achieve? I know that they want to achieve more than 9 and 10 wins a year. This is a blue blood of college football. So in order to get to that point, they need to invest into more than just the elite offense. So because of that, that's where right now, without the proof of concept, I really love their defensive staff and what they've brought in, but before seeing it, I see a team they can win 9 and 10 games a year maybe within the Big Ten Conference. Beyond that, college football playoff success, I'm just not so sure how far they're going to go. When Lincoln Riley went to the college football playoff at Oklahoma, he ran into a buzzsaw every single time he made it to that point. When I switch over to the Oregon Ducks, I see a potential Big Ten superpower, just the way they're built right now. I see both of these programs to have really good head coaches. I put both Lincoln Riley and Dan Lanning in the top 5 of my Big Ten head coach power rankings for the 2024 season, and I still believe that. I still believe that these are two of the best that this conference has to offer. Now, when you look at Oregon, why are they a Big Ten superpower? Well, you kind of take a look at what I just said about the USC Trojans and maybe their lack of defense, maybe their lack of play in the trenches. You have a guy in Dan Lanning that was able to go into Georgia as the defensive coordinator, and he learned what it takes to be a championship level team. He was the coordinator of that fantastic 2021 championship Georgia Bulldogs defense. He knows, he's been in the trenches, maybe in more ways than one. He's been in the trenches, right, with that type of team and that type of culture, and he's certainly bringing it over to the University of Oregon. You look at that offensive line last year, a candidate for the best O-line in the country. You look at what they have coming back on the offensive front this year. You look at what they have on the defensive front this season. Going out and getting a guy like Derek Harmon, having a guy like Jordan Birch, and then being able to recruit at the high school level in the trenches at the level that they are also feeds in to why I believe Oregon is probably more suited to achieve more Big Ten success than the USC Trojans. Whether you like it or whether you don't, money has a big part to play in this. I know we could be a couple of years down the road from rev sharing where everybody has the same amount of money to throw around, but NIL is probably still going to be around in that era as well. And there are very few that have more money than the Oregon Ducks. They are rowing in the same direction in Eugene, Oregon. There might be some troubles with House of Victory, the USC NIL collective. Been hearing that from Trojan sources, especially as of late with their recruiting, losing 2 5-star defensive linemen from the state of Georgia. That's where really that came into the light. But when you look at everything at Oregon, financially, on the field, strength and conditioning, everything, they are all going in the same direction. They all have the same vision. They are all going down the same path. Maybe NIL and Lincoln Riley tugging in maybe 2 different directions down there in Los Angeles, California. When I look at this Oregon football team, they remind me so much of when Penn State came into this conference in the early 90s when I was just 2 or 3 years old. Clearly, I remember it, right? But, when you look at Penn State, they joined in 1993. They were a 10-2 team right off the bat. Didn't win the conference title. That went to the Wisconsin Badgers that year when they won the Rose Bowl. But the very next year, Penn State, undefeated Big Ten champions, Rose Bowl champions, and a share of the national championship that year. They are the only team to be able to really come into the Big Ten over these editions and to be able to compete at that high of level. I believe that Oregon is very similar to how Penn State was in the early 90s, where they could come into the Big Ten and have a large amount of success right away. 2024 is going to tell us a lot with both Ohio State and Michigan on the schedule. If Oregon is able to beat one of those, if they're able to beat one of the big boys, they're going to come into the Big Ten swinging. That's really going to tell us a lot about the future of the Oregon football program. But Oregon, I think, has been able to recruit specifically the lines and the defense better than USC has. Right now, they've been able to stack top 5, top 7 type of classes under Dan Lanning right now, and that shows no signs of slowing down. If USC and their defensive staff can focus on development and have a proof of concept that they can develop great defensive players like D'Anton Lynn was able to do at UCLA, like Coach Hendy was able to do with the LA Rams, like Matt Entz was able to do at North Dakota State, then maybe this pendulum could start swinging back. But I think Oregon just has too many steps ahead right now on USC. I think Oregon is in that tier 1 in the Big Ten this season, and USC I think is a couple of tiers back. So they're playing catch up a little bit to I think where the Oregon Ducks are right now. But as we know, things can change very rapidly in college football. I want to know your thoughts. Who is in a better position to achieve more long-term Big Ten success, the Oregon Ducks or the USC Trojans? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. I'm Big Ten Ted. We'll see you in the next one.
Thanks for watching Big Ten Ted, where it's all Big Ten all year long. Make sure to like the video to spread the word of Big Ten Ted to the masses, and subscribe to the channel for updates on Big Ten content that drops every day.